It says the internet can totally see me now, but all I have is a screensaver type page. What in blazes is that? Okay. Okay. All right, is this working? I think it might be. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. All right, if you're here, say something in the chat room. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. Okay, hold on. All right, if you're here, say something in the chat room. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. Okay, hold on. All right, if you're here, say something in the chat room. My keyboard is very loud. All right, is this working? I think it might be. Okay. I think I turned off all of my Yes, who's here? Let's begin with that. It's 11:04 by my clock right now, so there are a few people who are late to class who I thought would be here. Do y'all not know what time class is? Mine says I'm streaming. Can anybody see this? Yeah, mine says I'm live. Oh, hey, can you see me now? Can you see me now? Can you hear me now? Did it stop working? Alrighty. I am going to assume you can see me. If at any point you cannot see me, say something, because I have the chat window live on top and I can see it. Okay? I'm going to give it just a minute more to see if anybody else shows up. I don't think I have any texts from anybody saying that they're having trouble getting here. No? Ah! Oh dear. What did I do? Okay, there's 5 watching. Ah, but the internet is fickle. I will not be famous long. This, I think, is going to be my 15 minutes. And I'm totally going to blow it. She can't watch without a YouTube account? Does nobody in her house have a YouTube account? Okay, I assume that everybody can see me and hear me. If you cannot see me or hear me, put a comment in the chat and we'll see if we can fix it. But right now I'm just going to start talking. I assume that everybody has been reading From the Earth to the Moon, and Arthur C. Clarke, yes? Let me get my class. Okay, first of all, since this is class, welcome to our snow day class. How about that? Due today, you had a writing assignment. How did that go? Tell me in the comments how the writing assignment for your future tech or your future achievement went. Okay? I'd like to know, since that was Friday's class that we kind of did electronically. Also today you have your thesis statement and 2 sources due. So if anybody is having trouble with that, email me, let me know, and we will deal with that. I'm watching the chat. Oh no. Why can't I see how many people are here? I ought to be able to see that. Well, Leonore, are you actually here? Can you actually see me and hear me? Hi, Leonore. Everybody who's here, say hi. All right. So what are these stories about that we're reading? Somebody tell me, what are these stories about that we're reading? From the Earth to the Moon and the Sentinel. I don't see demographics on mine. I'm going to move this up so that I'm not looking down so much. Okay. I tried to figure out how to put PowerPoints in this, and I didn't have time to figure that all out. So, The Final Frontier. No, specifically, what were they trying to do in these stories? Both of these stories are about y'all are supposed to be better at this than I am. I'm back. Okay. From the Earth to the Moon is about what? I mean, it's not about a trip to the zoo, y'all. Just, you know, here's a hint. There we go. It's a trip to the moon. They're going to the moon. And then in the Sentinel, where is he and what is he doing? So these are science fiction stories. And science fiction is supposed to take place when? So we have these stories about the moon, about going to the moon and about being on the moon. Okay, so they're supposed to be set in the near to really distant future. But when are they actually set? When do these stories actually take place? Based on their internal chronology. Do they take place in the future? They don't, do they? The Verne takes place in 1865, 1866, right after the end of the Civil War. And the Clark is actually set in 1996. So these things are technically set in our past. Okay. What about the tech? What about the tech? Is this tech that we don't have yet? When did we go to the moon? When did we go to the moon? We went to the moon in 1969. Okay? And we quit going to the moon in the mid-70s sometime. By 1980, we had quit going to the moon. So not only are these stories set in the past, but the things that they predict have either already taken place or already not taken place in our actual past. And we see this with other science fiction stories. 1984. 1984 was not like 1984, but as we get further along, more of that stuff happens, okay? So, hold that thought, and we'll come back to it. Let's talk about science fiction and genre. Y'all are familiar with genre, right? We have fiction and we have nonfiction. Nonfiction, we have genres of history, biography, how-to manuals, things like that. Fiction, we have this is hard for me to do without my whiteboard, people. I'm having trouble following my own train of thought. In fiction, we have short fiction and we have long fiction. We have fiction that's written. We have fiction that's filmed. We have realistic fiction and fantastic fiction like The Class, okay? Science fiction has its own subgenres, all right? It has what are called hard and soft subgenres. The science fiction that we have read up to now is generally in the category of soft science fiction, what's called soft science fiction, which focuses less on plausible future technology and achievements and more on the social implications of a given development. Which story did we read, or stories, if you can think of more than one, that was less concerned with the actual workings of the technology than it was with the effect of any given development on the society and on the people? Which of our stories fit or fits those categories? Can everybody access the chat? I only see Leonore, Ash, and Kristen, and I saw Maya. There were enough people here that we've probably also got Jacob and Charlton. Who am I missing? Okay, Maya can't access the chat. I'm sorry, Maya. Mia. See, I confuse y'all even when I'm not looking right at you. Okay. Hannah. Where's Hannah? Is Hannah here? Well, I don't know what to do about that. I'm sorry. There's a link further up in the chat. Maybe if they click that link, they can get there. Okay, so we have To Be or Not to Be falls into the category of soft science fiction. Okay, sociological science fiction. Vonnegut was not as much concerned with how we achieved immortality as with what the effect of immortality would be on the people who were then immortal. Okay, Barrier. On my screen, I can see the chat window and I can see myself without the delay. Y'all are on a delay. I'm not looking at YouTube. I'm looking at the software that is streaming to YouTube, something called OBS, with which I am not yet an expert. This is my first foray into this type of thing. But I think it's kind of fun, considering what the class is about. Okay. Soft science fiction. We talked about To Be or Not to Be. Barrier also falls into the subgenre of space opera. Okay. Space opera is an epic, it's an adventure story with the grand scope and the chivalric romance and the space battles, and the technology is kind of secondary. We never find out in Barrier how they get from one planet to another. We never find out how their plasma arc rifles work. We're not given a lot of details about that. I wish I could see y'all, but I can't. I don't know how to do that. I barely know how to do this. Star Wars is classic space opera. Okay. it's not really as concerned with how the technology might have developed or how the technology works. Even the uterine replicators are kind of a black box, is what we call it. It's technology that we have to assume that it works, even though we don't have any of those details in the story. Then we have what we're reading now falls into the category of what's called hard science fiction. Okay, air quotes. Hard science fiction is much more concerned with the plausibility of its tech and the plausibility of the achievements. Okay? Did y'all come to class in your PJs? No, space opera does not involve any singing. Space opera is, oh, I hate to say this, more akin to a soap opera in space than it is to an opera in space. Okay? So we have soft, sometimes called sociological science fiction, and we have space opera, which has elements of both sometimes to a greater or lesser degree, and we have hard science fiction, which is very concerned with its tech and how its tech works and how plausible its achievements are. So right now, the two stories I've had you read so far, From the Earth to the Moon, which you don't have to have finished yet, and The Sentinel, are focused on the technology, which is central to the story somehow. Star Trek kind of falls in between. It's space opera, like Star Wars. It has that grand scope. It has the space battles. It has the chivalric romance to an extent, and but it's much more concerned with its tech. It's much more concerned with making its tech at least seem plausible than Star Wars is. Okay? But here's my question, back to our original discussion. Back to what I was originally talking about. Here's my question. When you're hanging your story on the plausibility of your future tech, okay, or your future achievements, what does that do to the staying power of your story? What does that do to the relevance of your story for someone who's reading it in 2017? When you read these stories, do you think, why am I reading this? I want you to think about meteorology. I want you to think about the weather. Let's talk about the weather. Meteorologists make predictions all the time, and sometimes they're right, like today when we actually have snow. And sometimes they're wrong, like last Friday when we actually did not have very much snow or much bad weather or ice or sleet at all, and we could have all gone to school. I know you were all very disappointed. So we have these stories set in the past, for us, set in the future, for the people who write them. We don't revisit old meteorological predictions and marvel over, wow, they got this right and this wrong, and this is still very fascinating. So why do we read old science fiction stories? Okay? I want to talk for a minute about Jules Verne's predictions in the book. One of the things we can do when we read his book is we can see how right he was about so many things, okay? He put his launch site in Florida, which is not very far. It's less than 2 hours. Where he had his astronauts launch from is less than 2 hours from where we actually launched them from today, okay? And for the same reasons. When the space program was actually looking for launch sites, Texas and Florida were their two potential points because they're closest to the equator. Okay, and Florida won in that particular instance. Although we do launch rockets from, name the ship Columbia. That's right. Lost my notes. He figured escape velocity correctly. All that math is in the story. Okay. He predicted that aluminum would be used for the capsule rather than iron because iron's really heavy. Do we not launch them from Florida anymore? We do launch satellites from Florida. I mean, they still launch rockets out of Florida. And that was where the Apollo program launched from, the Apollo program that went to the moon. His spacecraft used rockets to steer once it was in space. And if you haven't got to that in the story, we don't put people in space anymore? Not even from Houston? You are better informed on this than I am. All of our astronauts launch from Russia? I am not sure I would trust the Russians to launch our astronauts. Okay. Verne uses very specific details too. Very specific details to add a feeling of realism to his story. So it still feels real to us today because some of those details are still very true. Okay. Arthur C. Clarke in The Sentinel. He's one of the world's most respected hard science fiction writers. Okay. And he uses those specific kinds of details to give realism to his story. Details about distances, details about how long the day is on the moon, details about how things look when there is no atmosphere, even the detail of the burning breakfast sausage that he includes. All give realism to his story. But every coin has a flip side, okay? For every uncannily accurate science fiction prediction, there have been a lot more that were totally off base. There were lots of stories before Jules Verne where people went to the moon, okay? They went in balloons. Why can't you go to the moon in a balloon? Why can't you go to the moon in a balloon? Verne in his story actually makes fun of people who wrote stories about going to the moon in a balloon. But of course you can't go because there's no, balloons are supported by air. And you get high enough, there's no air. Okay? And Verne understood the potential of rockets. He used rockets in his story, but he did not use rockets to launch his astronauts, like we ultimately did. He launched them from a cannon. So that he got wrong. Okay? And kind of the biggest thing that he got wrong was that he didn't account for the force of the launch and what that would do to his astronauts. It would have left them as little bloody smears, big bloody smears, inside their space capsule. Okay? He didn't account for that. So he got that wrong. All right? Clarke's predictions had a lot of inaccuracies. When he wrote the story, these were things that nobody knew. We hadn't gone yet. He wrote the story in 1949. It takes place in 1996. We don't have a lunar base even now. There is no base on the moon. He guesses that the mares, the ocean beds on the moon, were once filled with water, that there were river deltas, but we know that there was no water on the moon. Okay. He has plants living on the moon. Okay. So they got some things right, they got some things wrong. So why then read these? What makes these stories different from an old meteorological report that got some things right and some things wrong? I'd like y'all to speculate. Yeah, there never were significant amounts of water on the moon, I don't think. I don't think we think that now. And certainly no plants. Because there's no air. We think there may be anaerobic bacteria that don't require air, living in some of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, I believe. Is that why? Because at the time the story was written, it was impossible? Is that what makes these stories worth reading still? What does a story have that a meteorological report does not? Verne says that the sense of possibility must be kept alive. And so we know that some of these things worked out, and some of them may yet work out. We may yet have a lunar base, okay? So Verne says we have to keep the sense of possibility alive, and the fact that these things were written and then came to pass, some of them, much later, keeps possibility alive for us, because we can say, look at what they thought was possible, and look at what we actually accomplished. So there is that. But you still haven't answered the question, what does a story have that a meteorological report does not? I'm looking for two things. Two things that are central to any story. A moral? Does a story have to have a moral? A meteorological report is about the weather. A story is about the people, is it not? It's about the characters. Two things that a story has that a meteorological report does not. Characters. I'm sorry about the buffering. I don't know how to fix that. It has characters and it has plot. Right, they were not written for the purpose of trying to prophesy. They are stories. They are about the people. They are about the things that happen to the people and how they affect the people. So in that sense, there's a little bit of the sociological sci-fi in any sci-fi story. Okay? We read because we're interested in the people and how they deal with the situation that they're in and how it affects them. Yes? At least a little bit? And where have you heard that before? Think about where you've heard that before. Arthur C. Clarke wrote his story, what, 1949? World War II had just ended in 1945. It ended in part with the bombing, the atomic bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. So he was writing in a world that now had the capacity to completely wipe itself out. All right? And we still live in a world that has the capacity to completely wipe itself out. I don't know if y'all follow the news, but North Korea seems bent on developing that capacity for itself. And with a lunatic in charge, they might actually use it. So we have Clarke who's writing about a world in which we have the capacity to destroy ourselves utterly. And he posits in his story that we are going to have to somehow grow past that. And I am not sure that we have grown past that yet. But it keeps that sense of possibility alive. Okay? So he was writing science fiction that was about the people that were living right then. Remember, we talked about this. The essay by Lois McMaster-Bujold, Allegories of Change. She talked about how all science fiction stories, regardless of setting, are about us right now. And if they manage to hit on something that is timeless, like Verne's Brave Adventurers or Arthur C. Clarke's character who is worried about humanity and our capacity for terrible destruction, and also about our desire to know the unknown and to find out about things that we don't yet know. These things still apply. And I think that that's at least part of the reason that we still read Jules Verne, even though we went to the moon. And I think that's part of the reason that we still read Arthur C. Clarke, even though a lunar base remains in our future. Because the people in these stories demonstrate universal things about humanity. It's about us right now, as much as it is about a bunch of gun enthusiasts in 1865 who wanted to go to the moon. Does this make sense? Do you agree? Or do you think I'm wrong? So when you wrote about your future tech or your future achievement, and I have not read those yet, these things in isolation are no better than yesterday's weather report. But if you put them in a story and you show how they affect us, and you show what they change about us or don't change about us, then you've got a story that people are going to still read even long after the science and the tech is not of any predictive value or importance at all. No, I said you could put it in a scene. I don't think it's wrong. I said you could put it in a scene. So if you put it in a scene, then, I mean, that's fine. But I said you could also just do the description. You get a lot of leeway on a creative writing assignment. I wish there was a way to put the chat up for the folks to see who can't participate in it even. I think they're probably missing about half the discussion. Well, like I said, creative writing assignments get a lot of leeway. Now, the research papers are another matter. I do want you to email me your thesis and your 2 sources. Is anybody having any trouble with any specific kind of source? I tried to provide enough information that you could find the sources at least. But is anybody having any specific issues with choosing a topic or finding sources? Or writing a thesis statement? I will not get to be here on Friday. I will not get to be in class on Friday or Tuesday. You will have Mia's mom, Miss Kelly, and I will give her lesson plans. They may, they will probably be related to your research papers, more so than the reading. Although I may give her some things pertaining to the reading, simply because I don't want to ask her to do the reading. The one thing I am going to assign today that's new is I want you all to watch a movie. And our movie for this unit is going to be Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks and a number of other actors you may recognize. But Tom Hanks is the main character. And it's about an Apollo mission was supposed to go to the moon and didn't make it. So I enjoyed it. Thought it was a good movie. I will send you a viewing guide for it. Try to be ready to discuss that on Tuesday. Who all has seen it? Kristen clearly has. I don't think that quote is from Apollo 13. I'm not sure Toy Story fits the class, really. Hey, it'll show you all your progress very specifically, yeah. I don't see why she couldn't know it was 73% specifically if she was watching it streaming. I keep calling you Kristen. It's Bella. You're showing up as Kristen. I'm saying what I'm reading instead of who is actually there. Well, I assume it's Bella. Okay. You have the assignment for the research papers. You have the assignment to watch Apollo 13. Finish reading From the Earth to the Moon. I am going to give you an essay by Kurt Vonnegut in which he talks about how he doesn't like to be called a science fiction writer, basically. And so I will give you that. And we're going to next read handy dandy bookshelf. This is the book we will read next when we finish From the Earth to the Moon. It is about going into space, going to another planet. It has some commonalities with the Sentinel, and it has some commonalities with has some commonalities with the Sentinel thematically. We have met the alien, and we can't even talk to him. All right, it's 11:55. Officially, class is over. Do you feel very futuristic, or if we do this again, I've got to figure out a way to have it be something besides just me talking. George Clooney. George Clooney was in the film for the film version of Solaris, which it's very dull. We are not going to watch it. It is not fun. Apollo 13 is fun. All right. Look for emails from me. I will... They cut that out of all the movies. It doesn't buffer in the movies, does it? I think I'm recording this, and I think it will save. So anybody who was not here or who was not able to watch it live should be able to in a little while. And then you can fast forward through all the buffering parts, or no, you can't force. You can fast forward through all the parts where I'm waiting on replies and things, or scroll forward. All right. I will not see you all in class on Friday. I will not see you all in class on Tuesday, but I will be in touch because that's the wonder of the internet, right? I don't have to publish it in the paper or send it by a letter. I can just email you or text you and get you what you need for class. It's amazing. We can have class even when we can't have class. Alrighty. Signing off now. I think I'm going to try. And y'all have